Okay, I think we're going to get started. Everybody can take your seats. And those in the hallway that are joining us, come on in. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Are you guys having a good time today? Learning a lot? All right, fantastic. Well, I hope this panel presentation will be a continuation of all that you've learned today and will also inspire you and motivate you to think about your community as you choose your career next steps and your goals. So today's panel is entitled Black Lawyers as Difference Makers. How Black lawyers can utilize their legal training to do meaningful work and contribute to the uplift of the Black community locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. It's a very long title, but it's very important. Okay, so Black Lawyers as Difference Makers. And on the panel today, we have 5 incredible Black lawyers from across the country. They're going to speak about the difference they're making and how they're doing it in their respective positions of employment and also the roles they play outside of their 9-to-5 jobs. And we're going to go through a series of questions. At the end, I'll give you some time to ask questions to the panelists as well. And then we'll try to leave a few minutes after the panel so that you can meet the panelists, get to know them a little bit more, and get their contact information. All right, so to begin, I'll introduce myself. My name is Courtney Scruggs. I am an attorney here in Boston, Massachusetts, actually in Cambridge, here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I am corporate counsel for Sanofi. It's a pharmaceutical company. Here in Boston, we know it as Sanofi Genzyme. Most of my work is dealing with complex contract negotiations. So I am a contract lawyer. My clients are business people within my company that are negotiating manufacturing transactions with other pharmaceutical companies or contract manufacturing organizations. So I negotiate contracts with other organizations alongside business people within my company. So that's what I do. Outside of my 9-to-5 job, I'm the immediate past president of the Massachusetts Black Lawyers Association. I think you've met some of my colleagues today, our president, our vice president. Asha White, one of our panelists, is actually a director on our board. Our Bar Association is responsible for advocating for diversifying the legal profession here in Boston, in the law firm space, on the bench, meaning with our judges, in law schools as well, and a number of other institutions across our region. So, because our panelist is so accomplished, and it would take me quite some time to go through all of their accomplishments, we're going to allow them to introduce themselves and highlight for you what they think is most important to the context of today's presentation. So without further ado, I'll turn to our first panelist, Miss Veronica Dunlap.
Thank you, Courtney. And thank you all for welcoming me here today and my fellow panelists. It is such a joy to be here and see all of your beautiful brown and tan faces. I'm very hopeful for the future of Black and brown lawyers in this country, especially being here and seeing you all here. I am what most people refer to as a non-traditional attorney. My career path started as a professional ballerina. I danced for several years with Dance Theater of Harlem and with several other companies around the world. I traveled 44 states and several countries performing, and I realized that in all the companies that I was in, I was sort of the advocate. I found myself asking all the dancers if they wanted me to talk to management to sort of renegotiate our contracts because I thought they weren't fair. And I found myself looking up legal terms, and then one day someone said, you know, you should be a lawyer. And I felt like, you know, I probably will do that. So after I retired from ballet, yes, I retired. Many people think of retirement as 65. In the ballet world, it's closer to 25. I decided to go to undergrad, and then I went to law school. And while in law school, I did find that I was really adept at contracts, but I also found that I had a passion generally for advocacy, for advocating for people who didn't understand the law, who didn't understand their rights, and especially where there was a power dynamic that wasn't in the favor of the people. And during law school, I volunteered for several organizations, including the National Action Network of Reverend Al Sharpton. And after law school, I went to work for Al Sharpton, where I was his associate deputy counsel, general counsel. My apologies. And where I did a lot of work, of course, policy and advocacy, but also of day-to-day lawyering, defending the organization against lawsuits, arguing in courts on our position on certain policies within the NYPD, playing the role of monitor in the stop and frisk process after we won the case to overturn the way New York NYPD was doing stop and frisk. And after that, I decided I want to have an effect in police departments. I always felt like I was the adversary and on the outside, sort of trying to help them understand the perspective of the community. And I thought, there's really got to be a way for me to get closer, to get sort of to the ear of the people in charge. And with that, I switched to the National Network for Safe Communities, which I was just sharing with my colleague. We have an office in Chicago within the Chicago Police Department headquarters. And we sort of play the angel on the shoulder there. We play the conscience of the people to the Chicago PD. We do this in 40 cities across the country. We do it internationally in Bermuda, in in Mexico, in El Salvador. And outside of my work, I serve as the Chief of Staff for the Metropolitan Black Bar Association in New York City, where we have several initiatives that are aimed at creating a pipeline for Black and brown young people to become lawyers, as well as elevating the voices of the community and using our skill set to help them accomplish their goals and know their rights. Thank you.
Mr. Chris Stewart.
Describe myself. That's just weird.
The honorable.
If she's the angel on the shoulder, I'm trouble. I'm the lunatic that y'all see on TV when the police shoot somebody, acting a fool, representing the family. So I've represented Walter Scott in Charleston, Alton Sterling, Baton Rouge, Chase Sherman in Georgia, DeAndre Phillips in Atlanta, you name it, Antoine Galat in Chicago. So now I'm gonna start hanging with her so I can behave better. But I don't know. I mean, my firm is Stewart Felton, based out of Atlanta, but we handle cases in most cities. A lot of civil rights, and we'll talk about how I got pulled into that because I did not plan on that. I wasn't like some fight for power kind of dude. I was like, I'm trying to get paid. That's how I started off. I worked at a huge firm and then left and started a firm. We also do a lot of sexual assault cases. A couple months ago, I got the first $1 billion verdict for any sexual assault victim in U.S. history. Now I gotta wait for that check, but so of course that's being appealed and going crazy.
Pay out over time.
Yeah, but like I told her, it was really getting a 12-person jury to say that amount for a woman, right. Which means more because we're not gonna get $1 billion. Like, come on, companies are worth that. We better get something now. But it's what it stands for, and so we do a lot of sexual assault cases and take them to trial and see what the jury says. Pretty much it. I don't really know what else to say.
Mr. A. Scott Bolden.
Thank you. Let me thank the National Black Pre-Law Conference and Lawfare and all of their sponsors for today, for having us here, and my colleagues. I'm the lawyer that didn't leave the big law firm. And
That's why he's the richest.
that's another debate. Listen, I've been at Reed Smith, which is an 1,800-person law firm with 27 offices all around the world. I've been there for 28 years. I'm the first African-American associate in the history of the firm, 150 years, to be elevated to full partner from an associate. I do white-collar criminal defense work and regulatory litigation and some civil. And, from my perspective, having been there for so long, I'm currently the managing partner of the D.C. office, which has about 100 lawyers. I'm formerly of the executive committee worldwide, where we set comp and name partners and all the good stuff that happens at big law firms that if any of you all at a small or big law firm, you learn how the sausage is made. Before that, and I'm still litigating full-time and managing, and in a big law firm, they don't pay you to manage, they pay you for your book of business. And so from ground zero, I have grown a significant litigation practice as well as other practices that I cross-sell. Before that, that was 28 years ago. Before that, I was a prosecutor in the Manhattan office of the district attorney's office. Before that, I went to Howard University School of Law. You know. I went to Morehouse College undergrad. And before that, from the age of 6 until I was 18, I watched my father try cases all over the state of Illinois. In many respects, I was born to the law. I remember traveling to southern Illinois, which is below the Mason-Dixon line, and my father trying criminal cases, civil rights cases. He was head of the NAACP. He desegregated several facilities in Will County. For a long time, he was the only African-American lawyer in Will County. And from the age of 6, I was fascinated by the law. And I'll get into later how I'm able to stand on his shoulders and continue my work in the community as he did from this big bad law firm that I've been at for 28 years. Thank you.
How y'all doing?
Carl Williams, go ahead.
Go ahead. My name's Carl Williams, as she said. Thank you. So I do. If you do white collar criminal defense, I do kind of the T-shirt and Tim's criminal defense. So I defend folks in our communities here in Boston that are charged with crimes. I did that for many years with the public defender system, which is a statewide public defender system here. From the lowest level misdemeanors to the most serious felony charges. After 8 years there, for 5 years, I worked for the American Civil Liberties Union here in Massachusetts, mostly, and when I talk to the folks in the community, I would say technically, if I was talking to these folks, I litigated 1983 cases in federal court. If I was talking to you all and folks in our community, I would say we sued cops. So when police commit civil rights violations and people, the ACLU would sometimes take those cases and sue folks and try to get systemic change from the institutionalized system of racism, of white supremacy that exists in police stations in this country. And nationally also. I left the ACLU just this summer, and some of my former colleagues are amongst you today. But now I teach law. So I teach law students how they can be involved in social justice movements, because that's a lot of the work that I've done in my career. And I do that at Cornell Law School in upstate New York. And I also have a small private practice where I have a few cases here in Massachusetts defending some folks. And the other piece I'll just say, I also do a lot of work. I'm the chair of the board of the National Lawyers Guild here in Massachusetts. So if, how many people have been to like a Women's March, a Black Lives Matter march, an immigrants' rights march. How come all of you don't have your hands up? Some people, so I'm assuming some people just aren't in a mood to put their hands up. I'm just
That's what
but if you've been to a demonstration, if you've been, confronted by the police at a demonstration, maybe if you've been arrested at a demonstration, and you've seen folks with the neon green hats that are lawyers, that are law students, that are legal workers looking out for people at demonstrations, next time you see a photo of a big group of demonstrators, you'll see folks from the National Lawyers Guild there, bailing people, folks have heard about the Mother's Day bailout. We've been working with the Movement for Black Lives and with the undocumented student organizations and with a lot of the folks fighting in the Me Too movement for bailing people out when they get arrested, because people shouldn't be in jail just because they can't afford a price tag on their head. Because a long time ago, we used to have price tags on auction blocks, and now we have price tags in jail blocks, right? Anyway.
And Mr. Asha White.
Good afternoon. I'm the last and least interesting of this panel after hearing those introductions. But my name is Asha White. I was born in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, but I was raised most of my life in Providence, Rhode Island. I then came to Boston to attend Boston College undergrad. After leaving Boston College, I attended Northeastern University School of Law here in Boston. I was lucky enough to have two parents who encouraged me to become engaged in social issues and oral advocacy. My father is here in the audience somewhere. Dad, put your hand, there goes my father there. I want to give a shout out to my father, Clement White, who spent 30 years at the University of Rhode Island teaching and ultimately became the head of the graduate program in the Spanish department at the University of Rhode Island. And my mother, Jeanette White, who passed many years ago, was an English professor at Bryant College in Rhode Island, business school in Rhode Island, but she taught English in Rhode Island. But they were very encouraging of me going to law school, getting involved in social issues, and using your words as power. So I certainly owe everything to them. After leaving Northeastern University, I became a prosecutor here in Boston in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. I was initially assigned to Roxbury District Court, Roxbury being a historically black neighborhood here in Boston. When I got to Roxbury Court, I prosecuted everything from misdemeanors, and then later on I was assigned to specific neighborhoods doing firearm and violent offenses and things of that nature. I then was promoted to what we call superior court units. I was on the major felony team where I prosecuted surprise major felonies, mostly carjacking, bank robbery, drug trafficking, things of that nature. I was then transferred or promoted, in a sense, to the gang unit, where I prosecuted gang-related shootings and other violent offenses and things like that. After leaving the district attorney's office, I did civil litigation for 1 year at the City of Boston Law Department, where I defended city workers in different kinds of civil suits. After being bored out of my skull for a year, I returned to criminal law, and I became a criminal defense lawyer for 9 years. So in Boston, we have kind of a dual public defense system. Carl mentioned it. We have the state public defender's office, but we also have what we call bar advocate programs, which are private lawyers that accept appointed cases to represent what we call indigent clientele, means people who can't afford lawyers. So I was a private lawyer, but also accepted many appointed cases. The bulk of my caseload was appointed criminal defense work. I had a good private caseload, but it was mostly indigent criminal defense work. In my 9 years as a criminal defense lawyer, I did cases all over the state. Eventually, I went from district court to superior court, and in superior court, I defended people on sexual assault cases, firearms, shootings. Eventually, I was then sent up to the homicide list, what we call the homicide panel, where I defended people in homicide cases. At the time that I left, and I left being a criminal defense lawyer about 4 or 5 months ago, I think I was the only person under 40 years old in the state on the homicide list, and that was different. It was mostly older attorneys who were much more elder than I was. I know that's improper English, Dad. I apologize. But I did that for the last 9 years. Currently, I'm an assistant clerk magistrate in Dorchester Court in Boston. That's a fancy way of saying that I have certain administrative duties, but my main duties are what we call adjudicative, meaning that I make decisions on who gets charged with what crime. So contrary to popular belief, police don't charge people with crimes. They apply for charges. They ask the court to charge people with certain crimes, and it's my job to review that application and determine whether there's enough information or what we call probable cause to charge somebody with a crime. We also hold hearings where people are alleging that somebody did some sort of crime to them or harmed them. We hold hearings to determine whether that person is charged with a crime. I also approve or disapprove of search warrants and arrest warrants. So when police want arrest warrants and search warrants, it's my job to determine whether they've met their burden to kick down somebody's door and grab them and arrest them, which is, as you can imagine, a very important decision to make. As we heard earlier, those decisions with police interacting with people for black and brown people can be life and death. So those become very, very important decisions to make. I'm also on the board here for Massachusetts Black Lawyers with Ms. Scruggs, who's a past president. I direct the Social Action Committee, which is a committee dedicated to making the local community more aware of different legal issues affecting black and brown communities. And we also put on Know Your Rights presentations for young people all around the state. Thank you.
Yes, let's give this panel a round of applause, please. Okay, so jumping right into the discussion, the panelists have spoken to you already about what they do and touched a bit on the roles they have in their communities. And so what I'd like our panelists who are involved in the government is to explain why you chose to go in that particular direction. Asha, you can start.
Why I chose to go in that particular direction?
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna say a lie that lawyers always say. I'll be brief. I'll try my best to be brief and let everybody be able to get in on this question. So when I first went to law school, my intention was to do criminal defense. That was my intention when I went to law school. I had never considered prosecution ever for a variety of reasons that all of you in this room may guess. So it wasn't until I came across really great mentors, one being Rasan Hall, who's a mutual friend of many of us here on this panel, who introduced me to that world of law enforcement and prosecution and talked to me about the sort of differences we can make if we have people of different perspectives in those positions where you can make certain decisions. I always wanted to be involved in criminal justice issues, and that gave me the opportunity to do so. In addition to that, my skill set was really oral advocacy when I went to law school. I did moot court, mock trial, all those things, and had done fairly well in those sort of competitions. So I wanted to make sure I was performing on my feet as opposed to the transactional world. That's not a knock on the transactional world because they make all the money, or oral advocates do not make all the money. And they know I'm telling the truth about that. That's why they got the big bucks down the road, not me down here. But down there. But that, yeah. But that's why I chose to go the direction that I did, because for me the most pressing issue in black communities at that time, and nothing really has changed, was just the unconscionable incarceration rates, and that's the area that I wanted to attack, the area that I wanted to be involved in, So I put myself in a position that I knew would be a challenge, and it certainly was, but it was worth every minute of it. So that's why I chose the path I chose.
Excellent.
Yeah, if I can just add on to his comment very briefly, you know, the other important part of my brother down here is that it's important for people of color to be in the criminal justice system on the prosecutorial side. As a former prosecutor from New York, one of the things I always fought in New York was that the higher echelons of the DA's office in New York, there was nobody that looked like me. 80% of the people that we prosecuted in New York were black and brown people. And 90% of the people making the policy decisions were white folks. That just seemed not to make a whole lot of sense to me, just kind of just as a fundamental piece. And so there was a time when I was a prosecutor where black folks who were in the government would often be criticized by those in the black community, which didn't make a lot of sense to me, because as a prosecutor and what you're doing now, you help a lot of people in the community, and you are that buffer and that reason and that sense of community that you bring to the table when others in that same office would say, let's charge him with a felony, and you say you can't prove that, charge him with a misdemeanor, we'll give him community service. A drug dealer who's dealing near a school needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent, but an addict needs help. It needs to be a medical issue as opposed to a criminal justice issue. I don't know if that's your philosophy or not, but that was mine. And so when you see black people in the criminal justice system, if they're really black, right, and committed, then that's a blessing. It's not a child. It is a blessing.
If I might add on to what both of you are saying. So I don't work in government necessarily. We're usually subcontractors to city governments. And, you know, I have to add that, you know, working within police departments and working with law enforcement officials on a daily basis to sort of help improve their policies and practices and procedures, it plays the same role. So that generally, if there's some shooting, for example, in my neighborhood, I live in the 32nd precinct in Harlem of New York City, where we tend to have more shootings in other parts of the city. If there's a shooting, rather than coming in and arresting everyone on the block and sweeping every apartment, I help to advise the police chief and say, listen, let's talk to these particular community folks and help identify those 5 individuals who are driving 95% of the violence in this neighborhood, and focus on those 5 people. And because the people in this neighborhood want to be safe and they want to walk down the block without ducking bullets. But if there's no one there to sort of give that strategic advisement and that sort of perspective, then you do get full building sweeps, and resentment and damaged relationships between police and community continue.
Okay. So the reason why we asked that question, why, I know at your stage, as you contemplate law school, you're thinking about your practice area, and I want you to appreciate why lawyers choose the direction that they choose, right? And so you heard a little bit about the income disparity that exists, and that will continue to be a part of the conversation as you matriculate. But I want you to hear why some of our panelists chose to go into areas that we know traditionally are not the money-making roles, and their convictions for why it was still important to take that particular track. So now I'd like to turn a little bit to our managing partner here. Well, we have 2 managing partners, actually. Chris and Scott are both managing partners. But we'll turn to Scott first and talk to us with so much exposure to community work, exposure from your father, the NAACP. Why choose to go into big law and stay into big law?
That's a good question. You know, when I first started my law practice after leaving Howard, I went to New York to get experience. I was there for 4 or 5 years. I wanted to learn how to try a case. And at the end of those 3 or 4 years, all I wanted to do was go home and practice with my father. That was the game plan. My mother said it, he said it, it was going to be Bolden and Sons, except one thing. By that time, the old man had been practicing for 30 plus years, and he was tired of practicing law. You know, you will get tired of practicing law. You may keep doing it, but you will get tired of practicing after 30 or 40 years. And so he went to the bench, and he became a circuit court judge. And so at that point, for other reasons, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was unemployed for 6 months. I was supposed to go to DOJ. They had a hiring freeze. This was in 91, and a friend of a friend said Reed Smith was looking for a mid-level associate who had trial experience, and I was never built for that as far as a big law firm. People that looked like me didn't go very far in law firms, and I really wasn't interested because I really enjoyed trying cases like so many of my colleagues here on this panel. But on a whim and a bet, I literally interviewed with Reed Smith, my mentor, who became my mentor. I talked with him, Weldon Latham, who was a longtime black partner at a couple of different law firms in Washington, and I got the job, right? And so when I got the job, I realized I was the only one in the DC office that had as much trial experience as I did. Nobody else had the trial experience I had. And so that felt pretty good. But I still thought after 3 to 5 years, I'd figure out something else to do. But after a year or two, it felt good. Not just the money. I mean, we've talked about the money. It felt good, though, because I realized a couple things. One, I didn't want to work for a big law firm. I wanted to work with a big law firm. And to work with a big law firm, it gave me incredible freedom, right? In the sense that, sure, the money was good, but if I could build my law practice, right? If I could make partner, it gave me even more freedom. I could do pro bono work. I could do civil rights work. I could do criminal defense work, white or otherwise, by picking up cases at the federal district court level. I could sit on boards and commissions, right? And I could contribute financially to nonprofits and community-based organizations, and I could have this firm, my firm, contribute to have a significant impact on those organizations. And so once I figured out how to build my law practice and put my game plan in place, once you build your law practice, you become a partner at the law firm. Life gets a lot better then, but I realized I was working twice as hard. And so I don't know about my colleagues, but they're probably not home very much. And one thing we don't talk about as far as being difference makers is the work-life balance. I don't believe in work-life balance, probably because I'm awful at it. My wife and son are here. Stand up. Erica's back there. She lets me practice law with passion. My bonus son, Cole. Yes, you know, I want to make a joke and say, you know, Erica is my second wife, not my first wife, but she lets me practice law with passion. Perhaps my first, let me leave that alone. And I'm better at work-life juggle now. I'm better at work-life juggle than I did before her, without a doubt. But she allows me to practice law with passion. And so I wound up staying at the law firm because I realized that I could have an impact on my community, both locally and nationally, in so many different ways. I mean, right now, my part of the resistance to who's in the White House right now is I do a lot of legal and political commentary on a weekly basis as part of that resistance, and bring in legal and political analysis that is so deeply necessary for us right now, and what I call the third, and I and Roland Martin call the third Reconstruction, right? And so it just seems like a good place to be in, and don't let anyone fool you. There's nothing wrong, as Minister Farrakhan says, with making money, right? Just don't be a bloodsucker, right? Don't be a bloodsucker. I give back to the community in time, money, and resources, right? And I give more, and it's even more important for me because the idea of me taking and at the same time standing on the shoulders of my father and the great law professors at Howard Law School and at Morehouse College, the political science professors of mine, it just seems inconsistent with the debt of excellence that I owe them. And so that's why I stayed at a big law firm.
So law school is expensive, and we know that it's becoming more and more expensive by the year. With so many other ways to make a difference and so many other educational programs and degrees out there, why is it important, now more than ever, that Black people go to law school, earn law degrees, pass the bar, get their law licenses, and go out and choose to make a difference as opposed to some other profession, or to just focus on themselves, promoting their own career and making money, as we discussed? Any of our panelists?
You haven't talked in a while.
If you want to know the answer, it's not. You don't need to go to law school. There's work that we can do all over. Right. But if you've chosen it, so when people come to me and they say, I want to go to law school, as some people in this audience have, I say, here's a whole bunch of reasons why you shouldn't go to law school. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't go to law school. Debt is one of them. But actually, the debt part, you can handle that. There's a lot of ways that if you're doing what is called public interest work, I don't really like that term, but there's a lot of ways that your school, this school specifically, will do repayment things for you, and the federal government, there's question about what will happen in the future with that. The federal government, that is, and the idea that they're going to repay your debt. So there are things that can happen that can handle that. Also, the idea that, I just want to address the idea that we're saying like, oh, some of us don't make so much money. We're okay, right? I got a car, I got a house, we're living, right? And you're also much more. There you go. I thought it was we're living, but we're much more employable after you have a law degree, right, than before you have a law degree, right? You're also you're in a better financial position, even if you get out and whatever it is, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, you're still in a better financial situation because of the things that are in your brain and the things that you can put on a resume to get a job, right? Because if you have a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree, there's a level of whatever. We could look at the levels of employability. After you have a professional degree, like a law degree, you're much more employable. You're much more likely to be able to pay back those loans. So you're in a better position. So I think when people say that they really worry about that money they owe, it's a thing that you should confront, you should address, you should think about. But I think it's important for us as Black people to be in many spheres of the law. I might have some very strong disagreements about some of those spheres, which I'll just leave that for later when folks want to come up and talk. But I think with law degrees, we can, actually, I'll just tell it in the form of a story. Many people in this room, your great-great-great-grandparents actually ran. They were in forests, they were on rivers, and they ran from people who were chasing them, trying to re-enslave them. That happened for probably a very substantial amount of people in this room, our own relatives, right? And when they were doing that, I'm gonna take a little license here and say, they were thinking about something, right? And they weren't thinking about, my son, my daughter, the gender of folks is gonna be rich, is gonna have nice things. They weren't even thinking maybe they're gonna go to Harvard. They were thinking, they're going to be free, right? And so to me, and what all of us have said to some degree, is doing that freedom work, right? Going to law school sharpens your swords because you can do that better, right? Like Harriet Tubman did, like Angela Davis did, like some of our speakers later. One of the awardees is Catherine Cleaver, and she's inspired a lot of us, right, to do the work that we do. And I think for that reason, I mean, just when you're worrying like, I gotta write this essay, you're literally, some of our great-great-great-grandmothers, they were thinking about that, and they said, I hope that my children's children's children do that work that I'm doing right now. And y'all should still be running to do some of that freedom work.
I have a little bit of a different view. I flew up here for 4 hours just to see y'all, and I'm flying right back after this back to Atlanta because y'all will become a lawyer. Like, there's no doubt. Look, there's no option. Like, we are undermanned, underpowered, and wherever I go, I don't see enough Black lawyers. I'm usually the only one in the room, maybe 2 or 3, unless I'm at the Gate City Bar or GABWA or one of the Black organizations. And there's just no excuse for it. There's a whole different aura and power that you have being an attorney. than anything else in the world. You can walk into a room and tell people what is going to happen, even though if you may be wrong. All right. There's a different thing when you're just negotiating the lease on a car, or if you're trying to get a house, or if you're trying to get, there's just a different thing that happens with being a lawyer. But number one, you have the ability to decide your own fate in every situation. You're a walking business. That is a myth that you're either broke or rich as a lawyer. It's whatever you felt like doing yourself. Because you can make a crap ton of money and still fight for civil rights and still fight for whatever it may be. You just didn't feel like doing that route. And that's fine. Like I tell a lot of, big time personal injury lawyers that do not do civil rights, that's your choice. Like I still make a ton of money, but I also have put 6 cops behind bars for our cases. So it's just what you want to do, man. Like I tell them, some people it's just what you want to do. And as Scott was saying, if he's not in the area that he's in, I turn to big firms for donations and things like that they ain't writing checks to Howard Law. They're not writing checks to Xavier in New Orleans. They writing them here. They're writing them to their other schools, but we don't get that kind of support, especially at HBCUs, because we don't have Scots in the boardroom writing a 7-figure check. I go get $100 checks from my friends. You know what I mean? We don't have that same thing. So we all have to be in these different things. But the people on this panel are going to be done. And if y'all don't go to law school to replace us, then it's a wrap. They get happy when they don't see black males attending law school. Mm-hmm. Look at this room. This room is literally how the population of Howard Law is going to look probably this year, where it is going to be 80% female. And young black males are forgetting that the point of going to law school, or thinking that I can't do it or I won't survive or whatever it is. All you gotta do is survive. My grades were terrible in law school. I don't know how in the world I got done, but I got done. Dude, you don't gotta be straight A's to end up being successful, because I was not the example for any of that. So just apply. Yeah, apply. If you get in, you get in. Go. If you fail out, you try it. Go.
And
I just want to add one thing.
Recognized by Howard Law as well, by the way. Okay.
Don't get lost.
I just want to add one thing. I want to speak to the young women in the room, because my brothers here have made some good points, but I need to make another point, which is I'm usually always the only woman lawyer and woman of color. So usually I'm the only woman, and if there's another woman, I'm the only woman of color in 99% of the settings that I'm in. And I can tell you that it is a thing of power when I walk into the Chicago Police Department as a lawyer, woman of color, and sit down with the chief of police to tell him what his officers need to be doing to do a better job. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. And so I think the numbers for black women lawyers in this country hovers somewhere between 2 and 3%. We need to tell your friends. It can, like he said, it's not all about money, but I have to tell you, I make great money. I leave the country a couple times a year. My son is in boarding school. We do well. So you don't have to be broke if you don't want to be broke, and you can still do the good work for the people.
Are y'all in? Wait, we're talking to people that are in college, right? Okay, nobody's in law school already? Okay, good.
You all want to go to law school, right?
You all will go to law school.
Well, my colleague right here is very right. You could be successful and not be a great student. I flunked contracts my first year. And you know what? When I went to Reed Smith, they were supposed to pull my transcripts and stuff, but the guy who hired me, he was so lazy he never pulled my transcript. Watch this. This is really incredible. Had he pulled my transcript, they probably wouldn't have made me an offer. 28 years later, and
here you are.
Millions of money, millions of dollars generated for Reed Smith later.
That's right.
Would all be for naught. The other thing is this. And I'm going to speak for this panel, right? Every one of us up here are extraordinary in our own right? if you're going to be a lawyer, don't be an ordinary lawyer. Be an extraordinary lawyer. And you have to want to be extraordinary and be excellent, right? You have to, right? And secondly, on behalf of this panel, every one of us up here are doing what we're doing because we want you to be better than us, right? Be better than us. You can applaud yourself. Just be better. I want you to be better than my colleagues up here, because if you're no better than us, we're not making any progress. That's why we're here. That's why he flew up for 4 hours and going right back. That's why we're all here. You got to be better than us. Our communities, our country needs you to be better than us, right? You gonna commit to that?
Yeah.
Excellence and being better than us.
All right.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Scott. So we heard a little bit of sprinkling of college and law school, and I don't know that everyone covered where they went to college and law school in their intros. So I would like the panelists to go one by one and talk to us about where you went to school. You might have some fellow colleagues in here, and where you went to law school, and then talk to our group about ways they can make a contribution to the Black community while they are students in college and while they are students in law school.
Thank you. So again, I was a non-traditional student. I went to college when I was a new mother and already married and had a full career as a professional dancer, so I was in my mid-20s. I went to George Washington University in DC for undergrad, and I went to Fordham University School of Law. For law school, while I was at Fordham, I also got my MBA in finance. And I think what is important for you to do now is to think about yourself in the future. What do you see yourself doing there? For myself, I created a pathway. I don't know if you all know the science fiction writer Octavia Butler. Yes! And so before she wrote her first novel, she opened up her journal and she wrote out, I'm going to have a #1 selling, Black science fiction book. And then the next thing and the next thing. And you commit to it and you walk toward it. So if your goal is, for example, housing rights, I am going to find the largest housing rights advocacy group in the city where I go to school, and I'm going to volunteer there once a week. Make a commitment to yourself and to the thing that you say you believe in. And I think, there's no singular path for anyone, but you do have to have a singular and focused commitment.
Absolutely.
I went to Xavier University in New Orleans undergrad.
Thank you.
And then Tulane University for my Master's of Science in Public Health, and then Howard University for law school. What could you do undergrad? Stay committed. Like she just said, intern, volunteer places. You start to really see if that's what you want to do. If you want to do work in the DA's office, if you want to prosecute or do criminal defense, you should be volunteering with them for free, of course, because you need to be working for free. And volunteering so you can see what it is you really want to do. It'll give you such a head start. Yeah. During law school, same thing. Work for free for one of us. Y'all see the free labor part. But really just don't give up on it. One true story which set the whole thing of my entire career, I did not have the grades to get the internship I wanted my first year in law school. But I refused to not work for this very famous lawyer named Willie Gary. And I was obsessed with working for him. But my grades were horrible, man. So I went to Glamour Shots. I got a headshot done. I went and got 3 letter of recommendations from priests, pastors, all kind of stuff that'll make you feel bad.
With the Lord.
Oh man, and I wrote this letter and I sent it and didn't hear anything, and I sent one every single month for 6 months down there. And suddenly they called and were like, dudes, leave us alone. This is too much. But he's impressed. We'll fly you down to talk to him. and I got the internship from there. But it was because I was committed to what it was I was trying to do. I wanted to work for a real trial lawyer, that dude, and I wasn't giving up. So whatever you're doing right now, undergrad or grad school, if you see someone you are trying to imitate on this stage, don't give up in pursuing that. I meet a ton of kids, not that y'all that young, but young students all the time, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna keep in contact. I never hear from them, and I'm not gonna chase you. You shoot one email, I get 400 emails a day.
Right.
I'm gonna forget about that. So, you have to follow your dreams.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't add much to that. I completely agree with my fellow panelists. I will say this, though. Find your passion. Before you do those two things, right? Find your passion. And finding your passion isn't about just thinking about it. What do I like to do? It takes work. It takes silence. It takes, what is it that really motivates me? What do I like to do? What makes me emotional about something? What do I deeply care about? You got to find your passion. You're going to have to find your passion in the law, too. If you love doing civil rights work, you shouldn't be doing healthcare work, right? Because that's not a career path. That's just a job.
Right.
But find your passion. I tell my young son, we were just talking today earlier about his passion. He wants to do communications, wants to do media. But what in media and communications does he want to do? It takes research. You need to think through it, right? And see what gets you emotionally vested, what makes you emote about an issue in this country. And then secondly, you got to love yourself. Whatever you do out here in the law, she will take everything you got and demand everything that you don't. Quote me. You better have passion for it, and you better love yourself. Because how many of you all love yourself? Raise your hand. How you know? No, it's not of course. It's not of course. How you know you love yourself? Right? Because you treat yourself well? Because you think you're bright and beautiful? Right? That's not enough. Let me tell you something. You're going to have to love yourself, because whether you go to a big firm, small firm, right? You can never delegate the power to define how you feel about yourself to a third person. This law game out here, everybody doesn't look like you, doesn't care about you, and could care less, even more less about you, right? They will marginalize you. They will undermine you. They will try to make you feel less than they are. This is real. I don't care what your area of law is, right? Or what you do. They will. And the only way you can stop delegating that power to define how you feel about yourself is to love yourself. I hug myself every day in the morning. I'm the first one I hug every day in the morning. I get up and I hug myself. My wife said, yeah, I know. I'm going to add her to the story. My wife said, what you doing? I said, I'm hugging myself. She said, what about me? I said, I'm going to get to you in a minute. But right now I'm hugging myself. Because I'm getting ready to head out here and do my business out here in the streets. And I do mean the streets at that big law firm. So let me just tell you something. You better love yourself. You better love yourself, because they will doubt you. And if you start doubting yourself, you've lost that game. Yeah?
Oh, and Scott is HU also. I think. Hustle also.
Yep, hustle too. Yeah.
Brother, you definitely gonna miss your plane. So you didn't say your schools. That's what she asked.
I said it 3 or 4 times, but thank you for asking. Morehouse College undergrad, training ground for black leadership for men. And Howard University School of Law, you know.
I just did that because I went to two PWIs. Someone tell them what a PWI is. Predominantly white institutions. Anyway, I just learned that one. They all know.
It's okay.
Millennials and these Gen Zs, they all know that. So I went to, but that's an important thing to know, because I want to say, how many people have heard the term imposter syndrome?
Hey, yeah.
Okay, and how many people are just not raising their hands? Okay, good. Because I'll say this for all of us, and y'all can nod or say that you probably have felt this, and if you go to law school, even if you go to a black law school, you will feel like everyone else is supposed to be here, but I'm not supposed to be here. And I hope they don't find out. You're going to feel, you might have already felt it now. You might have felt it some things today. But that's a real thing, though. And I just want to say about that thing, because I went to, and I said the PWI thing, because I went to the University of Rhode Island. I grew up in Rhode Island, and went to a school with, there were so many white people. Every time you walk by a black person, they would be like, hi. And then I went to the University of Wisconsin, and and I went to law school when I was 34 years old. But I went to the University of Wisconsin, and people would walk the same thing. They was like, hi. Because there's so few of us.
Did you speak back?
What? I would say hi. Yeah, I do that. And now I teach. I never went to a private university at all. I never went to a private school at all. But I teach at one. And at Cornell, you might imagine the same thing. And every time I'll see an undergraduate that just got on campus, they're like 17, and they're like, hi. And I say hi. But so I went to University of Rhode Island. I went to University of Wisconsin Law School, and I've taught at a few law schools since then. But the one thing I think you can do in that is find your people. Find our people, right? Find folks that have the same politic as you. Find folks that have the same cultural backgrounds as you. And when you talk to them, you will realize that the struggles that you have that you think are way in the back of your mind, like that imposter syndrome, be like, oh, you have that too? I didn't, because I had never heard that until like after I was out of law school. I said, damn, someone should have told me about that. And when you have that and you find those folks, because there are people right now in every law school in Massachusetts, in every law school in this country, that are looking for you. Mm-hmm. If you walked up to them in a law school and said, I don't go here, but I'd like to know a little bit more about it. If they don't stop, call me and tell me who it was. They will stop and say, hey, you know what? I'm busy right now, but you know what? I'm gonna give you my card. Or go to, a BALSA, which is Black Law Students Association, or even undergraduate, if you have black student unions. There are folks there who are getting ready to go to law school who you probably are in this room or you've probably connected with already. This is why you know about this conference. But there are people who are looking for you. There are people on this panel who are looking for you. There are people in law schools who are looking for you. There are people who are lawyers who are looking for you. And connect with those people and say, hey, I'm interested in this work. I'm interested in doing this thing. And they're going to steer you to the right, 90% of the time, they're going to steer you to the right place.
All right. Asha?
So I went to Boston College for undergrad, not officially a leadership training ground for black men, like Morehouse is, but became a training ground.
For you.
Well, he went to Boston University later, but neither is that, so same thing. But ultimately it did become a training ground, and I'll explain why in a second, because these universities, they have their issues. They're also excellent institutions of learning that if you pay attention and put in the right effort, you do come out a much better person. So when I was at Boston College, what I did to give back to the community was to participate in any social justice cause that I could, that I believed in. College campuses forever have really been the epicenter of social justice movements in the United States. When I see college students protesting now and I see older people complaining about it, I don't get that. I look at it with nostalgia and say, I wish I was still there. All right, so you have an incredible amount of time on your hands in undergrad. You don't realize it right now. You'll look back one day and be like, wow, that was a lot of time I had on my hands in undergrad. And if you were anything like me, sometimes you would be doing great stuff and participating in forums and great discussions, but for the next 2 months, you were eating cereal, watching Scarface 10 times a day, or to something completely unproductive. But while you're in undergrad, take a part in any sort of social justice cause that you believe in. You have the time, you have the energy, you have the most open mind you'll ever have. This is where you're learning about life. So that's the way you can really help the community by learning and also giving back at the same time. While you're in law school, I think there are 3 general ways that you can give back. And I'm sorry for being a little bit repetitive. We've already heard a lot of what I'm going to say. But one of the things you can do is obviously continue to take part in any sort of causes that are outside of law school. You don't have to give that up just because you're in law school. But in terms of what you're doing in law school, representing people or working for free is important. And Chris mentioned that it's critical, right? If you want to be able to give back, and learn at the same time, working for free, representing pro se litigants, whether civil, criminal, whatever it is just invaluable, and it helps the legal system as much as it will help you. The third thing I would say while you're in law school is when you develop an idea, and really going forward from law school, I should say, when you develop an idea of what you want to do, it doesn't have to be melodramatic in order to help the community. Some things sound really, really great. You know, I say I represent people in homicide cases, everyone goes, ooh, you know, and that's great, fine. But for instance, here in Massachusetts, here in Boston, they've been looking for more black lawyers to serve on the liquor licensing board. That doesn't sound as sexy as other positions, but that's how you open black businesses, is by getting a liquor license. You can't open restaurants without a liquor license. You can't make any money. So if you don't have people in the community there willing to give people a chance in certain neighborhoods and approve those applications, we're never going to have the sort of black businesses that we want. That serves on the board with me and Courtney on Mass Black Lawyers. We have a gentleman named Clarence Richardson. He represents people in foreclosures and bankruptcies and things like that. He's helping the community as much as any criminal defense lawyer, as much as any prosecutor, as much as anyone doing anything in immigration. There are people losing their homes. We all know about the crash of 2008 and the fallout from that. There are people losing their homes, losing their property, and we need lawyers of color who not only are competent, but are competent with care. And I also want to add one additional thing about why it's important to go to law school. And Carl touched on the historical perspective. I heard another comment that we're undermanned, and that's absolutely correct. Not only are we undermanned, but we're currently really under attack. And what I mean by that is, if you had told me, let's say when I was in law, I graduated law school in 2004. When I was in law school, if you had told me that we were going to be dealing with a Muslim ban, banning one religious group from entrance to the country, that there was going to be an attack, a potential attack on birthright citizenship, even though it's a bedrock of the Constitution, that we would have widespread voter suppression across different states across different cities in the United States. Any one of those, I would have called them a constitutional crisis, just to have one of those issues. And the last 2 years, that's 3 of them, right? And that's 3 I'm just picking out, because they're the ones that are just at the forefront of my head, because we just had the midterm elections. So we're under attack in a way that even a cynical person like me didn't see coming 10, 15 years ago. So we need more people to go to law school, because number one, our numbers are still embarrassingly low. But number 2, black lawyers are social justice warriors. Your presence in and of itself is disconcerting to people. And once you go to law school, and once you go to law firms, or once you practice in government, you will see your presence in and of itself is uncomfortable, revolutionary, and disconcerting. And if you're competent and you're extraordinary at what you do, that is going to make much more of a difference than you probably appreciate at this moment. So I would encourage everyone, if you're thinking about law school, apply and go.
All right.
Real quick, like
Sure.
20 seconds.
Go ahead, Scott.
That is this. And in the last 2 years, just taking off what you said, the bastion of defense, the pushback, the protector of our Constitution and of our people and communities has been what institution? Hadn't been the House or Senate, hadn't been the White House, quite frankly. It's been the judiciary. Yes. And in the judiciary, that is where the lawyers do their best work. Yep. The judges have done their best work in pushing back, whether they're Republican or Democrats, and we could add 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 other issues that the courts have saved us as long as they possibly could. Now you've got a House of Representatives that's going to be another level of pushback, not just for Democrats or people of color, right? But for our American society, for our American values, and for who we are as a country.
All right. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to ask questions to our panel, and then we'll let our panel give you some closing remarks. So are there any questions? Yes, right here in the orange. If you will stand up, tell us who you are and your question. Project, please.
Hi, my name is Stewart. I am a house love. I obviously am not a spring chicken. I am looking to do this I got caught up in 2008 and said, okay, well, what can I be doing differently with my life? My background is engineering. I'd like some advice or insight from you all about how I should view or what perspective I should have about hopes or plans for a career since I'm not, younger looking to do it, how I should view it or how I should strategically plan so that I can have an extraordinary second career type of.
So if we can have one or two of our panelists address that question.
I'll just say, as I said, I went to law school when I was 34, graduated, and I did law school in 2.5 years because I wanted to leave the predominantly white institution. So I didn't go to law school for long enough, but I graduated. But really, I mean, that process for me, and where you are in your life with family and children and where you need, and other commitments you might have, I don't know, but it really didn't change the process at all. I mean, I just applied for jobs that I was looking for. I think I was more concrete than my classmates in the things that I wanted. So I think I got a lot more out of law school in a lot of ways. You have a lot of offers in law school to be like, oh, you can be on this or you can be on that, you can be involved in this thing. And I was like, nah, not gonna do that, not gonna do that, not gonna do that. To some of my classmates sort of thought that was strange, but I said, look, I'm confident enough to know that that's not a thing I want to do. And that actually helped me quite a bit in law school, because people will tell you, there's this little thing that people say about law school: the first year is scare you to death, the second year is work you to death, and the third year is bore you to death. And the work you to death happens because in the first year you find out about all these things and you sign up. People who are students with more life experience will say, like, I'm not signing up for that, I'm good, right? Because you've experienced that in your life. Where if you're younger, you might, we're like, we can do all these things. So you're probably gonna have a much better experience than some of your less life experienced classmates. So people should go to her and see what she's doing when she's in law school with you.
I'll just add one thing, is that if you do have a family like I did, I was, married, had a child, it's important to have a support network. It's important to have those aunties and, play cousins and uncles for laps to sit on while you're studying or while you're preparing for exams. And thinking about your broader network. Sometimes at schools they will have sort of like a non-traditional students group, which I did join, where we would have a babysitting circle, or we had an opportunity to study with our kids in the room if we needed to.
And I just want to say, I volunteer regularly with NIG, and I'll be participating in the legislative conference next Tuesday.
Fantastic. Okay, so the question right here, and then we'll get you over there. Go ahead. Stand up, please, and tell us who you are and project your question.
My name is Donna. Thank you for being out here with us today. My question is, sorry, can you hear me? My name is Dava. What have you seen that you can share with us as practicing attorneys? Sorry. What have you seen as practicing attorneys that you can share with us as being sort of the lower depths of white supremacy and how it goes unnamed in the legal profession and how it permeates society?
So Chris is going to take that question. Okay.
I mean, it's real. I travel with armed guards. I leave, when I go take a civil rights case, there is a security guard with a shotgun in my driveway to protect my wife and my daughter. I travel with armed guards. Like, that just kind of explains to you how real it is. People have tried to break into my hotel rooms, hacked my websites, hacked all kind of craziness. Pretty easy to find. I'm like, you really want me? You can find my address. I'm from Southwest Atlanta. I'm strapped, so you can come get me. But I mean, it's real. It's real, and it's real because what you're doing gets people fired.
Yeah.
It gets people put in jail.
Yeah.
It exposes not just the cop who did it. It exposes the chief, the assistant chief, the head of IA that's been overlooking it for years.
Yeah.
And it messes up a system that doesn't really like a lot of light shed on it. And I'm not the most quiet person, so I'm going to be on CNN acting a fool talking about he's doing it, he's doing it, he's doing it, he's doing it. And, you know, and then they have to pay a lot of money. I don't do it for charity. This ain't no charity thing. That city's gonna pay my client's family millions. So it's just all bad. And so there are lunatics that will see you on TV, especially after Trump has got them all crazy, and then they become obsessed with you and start doing stuff. So you just got to know what you're walking into. It's not for fame. Ask Ben, who's a good friend of mine, like, this isn't just to be on TV. You're going to deal with something, but it's worth it.
You know, I'm sorry. No. I think that's a really good point and great point. You know, I do Fox News once a week with Laura Ingraham. Yeah. No, because they need to hear my voice. They need to hear my voice. I've done Tucker Carlson, and that interview with Tucker Carlson made it on A1 of the Washington Post regarding the NFL protests. Let me say this. Not only is it real, but it despite it being real, it has no depth or substance to it. So for 2 days after I do Laura Ingraham, I get social media postings that are racially threatening and offensive. I get telephone calls on my direct line at Reed Smith threatening me, okay, whether it's my life or my just confrontation of me. And I get texts, right? I once got a text that went on for 5 pages, it seemed, with just in capital letters, Nigger. It went on for 5 pages of texting. And every once in a while, I'll engage someone who sends me an offensive text and say, really? We don't know each other. You never met me before. You heard me on TV and we disagree about the president or policy or law. We just disagree. Never met me before, but I'm an idiot, I'm a moron, or I'm the N-word. I said, that's incredible. How do you do that? Other than hiding behind social media, you can do that, but why? I mean, we both love this country. My people built this country on behalf of your ancestors. We all in it together. Is your blood a different color than mine? Right? You got different muscles than me. So we're a melting pot of immigrants, right? Unless you call it Native Americans, and you know what you people did to the Native Americans. My point is that there's something wrong with this country. And from you being threatened and being strapped and traveling with guards, for me being threatened and turning it over to firm security and what have you, I felt afraid. Not afraid, fearful, you know, from time to time after commentary. And I'm not on TV saying anything stupid or crazy. I just speak the truth, you know, and do analysis. And something's wrong with this country, and this 35% that has been energized and made it okay to be outwardly racist, but more importantly, to manifest white supremacy in the mainstream, right? You talked about white supremacy, but something's wrong, and we, regardless of what you call the person in the White House, the racists call him racist, right? As Mr. Gillum said down in Florida. Mm-hmm. And so we got to do something about it. Right. Because you shouldn't be traveling the way you're traveling. I shouldn't be harassed because of my opinion. Democrats shouldn't be getting bombs in the mail. People shouldn't be shooting people over politics and because of who's in the White House and who said what. And words matter. Yeah. Words matter. They do, right? And I'll conclude with this. If the possibility that your words at a rally motivated people and got people in a frenzy whereby an unstable person, 2 or 3, could go out and do the unthinkable, send bombs or shoot people, right? Shoot a synagogue, right? Or a white woman being killed in Charleston, Virginia, fighting Nazis last year. The possibility the possibility that your words encourage that, right? Wouldn't you stop? Just on the possibility alone. We got to do something about it, folks. And as lawyers, you certainly can.
All right, so I like, please. So I'd like to take more questions, but we really don't have the time. So what I'm going to ask our panelists to do, first I'm going to ask you to get your pen and paper ready, because as soon as we finish, I know you all going to run right up here to meet these panelists and get their contact information so that you can be as persistent as Chris was to get his first job. But
Stalking is illegal, though.
But what I like the panelists to do is give some closing remarks. Let's do about 30 seconds. Scott, you can do 45. And see if we can inspire this crowd one last time before they break out for individual conversations with you all. Please go ahead, Veronica.
I will end by saying thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Thank you, Courtney. And I would encourage you all to do it as Scott said, to love yourselves and to know who you are and to be confident and grounded in who you are. Because if you do go through this law process, the law school process, even onto a law career, it will challenge you. It will shake you at your core and make you question who you are. Hold on to each other. Hold on to your convictions, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
Good. I can still make my flight. My email address is cstewart, Stewart, at ssfjustice.com. Stewart C. M. Felton, and L. Chris Stewart, if y'all forgot, which y'all probably did because I'm not important. C. Stewart at ssfjustice.com. My main thing to y'all is don't be a punk. Like, look, y'all owe this to y'all family.
Yeah.
Like, y'all are in a position that with every generation of African Americans or minorities, you are getting better off. My parents were not like educated or didn't have very good jobs. Like one of them finished college, but we weren't in that position. There are no lawyers, period, at all in my entire family, or doctors. So, like, y'all are carrying on, like, a tradition. You owe it to your family to become lawyers. Like, you owe it. Scott owed it to his family. Like, his generation is going to keep on going. They won't know anything but a great line of lawyers. I'm starting that with my family. You see what I mean? So, y'all owe it to your community. Southwest Atlanta don't have people just lawyers. Like, hey, you know Tim up the street that's a lawyer. We don't have that. But now the first place we put our billboard and our sign was in Southwest. Right. Like, you don't have a choice, man. Yeah, you could punk out and just find some job and make money. But, like, you owe it to your communities to go and try and be a lawyer. And if you don't make it, so what? But y'all owe it to at least try. Absolutely. So, that.
I'm going to be brief. I promise. It is still a noble profession. It is still a noble profession. When I traveled the state of Illinois with my father and we would get below the Mason-Dixon line in Collinsville, Illinois, we used to have to stay with what he would call your aunt and uncles or cousins that you never met. I knew he was lying then because I'd never seen this woman in my life. They didn't even look like me and my mom and daddy, you know? They're lying to me, right? But they took good care of me and they fed me, and sometimes they had kids so he could try a case in southern Illinois that's below the Mason-Dixon line. My father was my hero, and he was the greatest lawyer I've ever seen, and I watched him since I was 6 years old. He still counsels me on my cases. It is a noble profession. Thurgood, Hasty, Charles Hamilton, Houston make it noble. And folks like you in the audience are going to make it better because you stand on their shoulders. I stand on my father's shoulders, and let's not forget about Johnny Cochran and my colleague here who is doing yeoman's work in this space to save our black communities.
Right.
If you want to save somebody, if you want to be about somebody, if you want to be respected and you want to make a difference, there's no better profession to do it than to be a lawyer who is excellent, extraordinary, and happens to be black.
Absolutely. That's right. Carl?
I'm going to take a guess and address what I thought the second part of the sister in the front's question was. There's little white supremacy, and that's the micro. That's individuals who wear sheets and who have Confederate flags and who are in the White House of the United States of America, and now sometimes on the Supreme Court. Those are people who believe we are lesser. Those are people who believe that there's a DNA structure that makes us less. There's also the what I call macro white supremacy, and that is embodied by the Constitution of the United States, unfortunately, which says we are not human beings. And you can't erase words in a Constitution. When you modify it, the little law class, you can't change words. Yeah. You can only add words, right? So those words that say you're 3/5 of a human being and that say Native Americans are no fifths of a human being, those are still in the Constitution. I used to work into a building, downtown Boston, John Hancock, you see it's on Skyline, and it's engraved in the wall. And I would walk in, I'd be like, I don't want that engraved in the wall, right? I don't want that Constitution engraved in the wall because it says I'm not a human being, right? So when we talk about the macro white supremacy, it's the founding documents of this country, and that scares the crap out of people. If I said that in a mixed audience, if there's some white people come up afterwards and I'm like, I don't think you should say that. The Constitution is really, what we should do. And you will have to confront this. You will have to confront this. So I would say, it's from up here, it's a great view. It's a lot of black women in this room. There's not a lot of men. But in that, you've already fought the fights, right? When I was in law school, I remember the black women who were in law school, you could make any of these people a senator right now, and they would just be good at it. They would just be able to, and I was like, why is this? And I said, it's because if you are a black woman and you get to law school, you already had to fight all the fights. So if you're there, then you just coast. And you'll get good grades. But those things I think are important for us. We need to raise our voice, and I think in the last few years, people have really been doing this. And also, black women are the bellwether for this country and for, in many ways, the world. Because if y'all are free, all of the rest of us are definitely free at that point.
Asha.
Well, how do you follow that?
No. I know you.
Two quick things I would say. That while you're in law school and as you're a young lawyer, the quote I always use is listen more, talk less. Right? So you really have to, they call it practice for a reason when you practice law, because it takes that amount of effort. One of the most backhanded compliments I would hear after I would finish trials is that people would come to me and say, oh, you're a natural. There's no such thing as a natural. That's not really true. There are people who have some gifts that make you more predisposed to do certain things, but there's no such thing as a natural. And all you see is the finished product. You don't see those weekends and those nights that, I was practicing because that's all I did. All right, so you have to put in that amount of effort to do what Scott said, to be extraordinary. It doesn't come overnight. You have to stick with it and give that sort of effort. The second thing I would say is that the greatest honor for me now in my current position is when a police officer approaches the counter at the office, the courthouse that I work at, and he says, okay, we have this person, we want to be able to kick down their door, and we want to be able to kick down their door without knocking, without any sort of good information that they're involved in illegal activity. They're the worst person in the world, because there's a new worst person in the world every week. All right, they're the worst person in the world, and this is what we want to do. I say, thank you, officer. No. Okay, and then comes back and he says, there's this guy, here's a police report. We were trying to tell him to move. He didn't want to move, so he began yelling and screaming, which is legal on a public street, by the way. He began yelling and screaming, so we're asking you to charge him with disorderly conduct. Respectfully, officer, no. All right? So the reason why I say that is at the moments that happens, and it happens for me every day, and I can read that word that's swirling around in his head as I tell him no. All right, and you can take a guess what I think that word is in his eyes. All right, and he can't do anything about it but go home and try again. All right. So, and if he or she meets his burden, then so be it. But I say that to stress to you, becoming a lawyer is a profession where people don't have to like you. All right, it doesn't matter. but at some point, they're going to have to respect you and they're going to have to listen to you. And that's what's important.
All right. On that note, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Please get ready to meet these wonderful panelists and give them a big round of applause. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a quick presentation. Before I do that, again, I want to ask you all to give a round of applause. This was phenomenal. Thank you so much. We've been doing this every year for the past, this is the 14th year of doing this, and I just think it's so important for you not only to hear from Black lawyers about what they do, but like what we've done today, for them to talk about what we can do to uplift our community. It's a critical discussion and something that you all need to really think about in terms of your legal careers and the impact you want to make. I hired an artist to create a special, Chris, come on, to create a special painting for you all. It's an African American woman of justice. And it's a piece to get people talking, okay? Oh, no.
Yeah, I impose, right?
Okay, well, maybe another year when we honor you, we'll do something like that. But, so I have that for all of you, so that's the special gift that I wanted to prepare. So not just a regular plaque, this is something that could be, again, something that you all can talk about. So I want to go ahead and give this to you before you leave, so I'll do that really quickly. Okay.
You're so sweet.
Everyone's like wondering what it looked like.
I want to see show.
And this is